Hello and welcome to this episode of the Healthy Business Podcast. I am super excited. I have the wonderful Beth Hocking who is joining me today, and we're going to be delving into leadership and the importance of that, and really looking at different ways that we can maybe handle conflict and diversity of thinking at a leadership level, and really stepping into being proactive with things, I think, as well. So I'm really excited for this conversation. Beth, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh my goodness, Sarah, what an invitation. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited for this chat.
Yeah, me too. So before we even delve into our deep conversation, which I know is going to be amazing, one question that I always ask my guests is, what does a healthy business mean to you? And I'd love your take on this.
Obviously, I've been listening to your podcast, and this question just opens up such a lot of different facets, doesn't it? And I obviously had the ones that come up quite regularly, but from a kind of commercial background, which is where I come from. So I spent 20 years in corporate and in commercial sales only. So it's one of those things that you can take the girl out of sales, but you can't take sales out of the girl. So my instinctive answer to this question is that it has to be profitable. And if you don't have a profitable business, you have a hobby. And I can't remember who said that. I think it could have been Rich Litvin who had said that, but that really resonated with me. And as much as we love to make an impact as entrepreneurs, and we've got such a passion and such a big heart, we do still have bills to pay, and there's a reason that we wanted to set up our own path and our own different way of working that wasn't just corporate. And for me, it definitely has to be a profitable business is a healthy business.
I love that. Yeah, it's so important, isn't it? Having that consistent cash flow, but being able to take money out of it so that you can pay yourselves and pay the bills. One of the reasons you set your business up is to have that flexibility, but actually you still want to make money from it. And I think a lot of people shy away from talking around that financial side of things. But as you said rightly, it's otherwise a very expensive hobby that you end up just plowing a lot of time and energy and finances into, and not getting the rewards that you should be and that you want to. One of the other things that we kind of spoke about before we came live was around this idea of soul alignment as well when it comes to healthy business. And I really want to delve into your take on that as well.
Yes. So I wanted to hit you with something that was super obvious that was coming on my mind, which is obviously the profitability, which was healthy. But when I thought about, how I would answer this question from maybe a more holistic perspective, and, the reason of why I started my business, it really is about, for me, a healthy business has to be about passion and purpose and aligning with your mission. And your kind of soul's calling. And I know that may sound a bit woo-woo to those kind of corporate people who haven't kind of maybe dived into that a little bit more, but I think we can kind of get I don't want to say pigeonholed, but at the same time, like if we've done something for a long period of time, like I was in corporate for 20 years, I know you had an extremely long period of time in corporate as well. And we can get very safe and very secure in that corporate environment. And what, we were both extremely successful in that environment as well. And the temptation is to stay there for a really long time and, progress through the career ladder. And that's absolutely what we both did. However, for me, there was always that nagging element of, I really felt called to start something different. I really felt the need to support women in leadership and, supply them and empower them with, the soft skills, the human skills, and, what it would take in this environment for a woman to be successful in leadership. And when I think about the necessity that we have in our world right now for the voice of women in leadership, I can feel how passionate I am about the mission. And for me, that's what makes a healthy business. So it's not just about, the profitability, right? If you're leaving your corporate job because you think that you're going to be paid better or there's more profit somewhere else, then you are very sorely mistaken, I think. So I think, if it's all about profit for you, then you won't feel that soul alignment, and you won't feel that that's the kind of healthy environment where you're going to thrive. And I had a quote, and I wondered if you'd indulge me, from a book called The Illusion of Money by Kyle Cease. And one of the very last sentences is that every time that you align with the calling of your soul instead of the fear of your mind, we all move closer to what we are meant to become.
I love that quote. What a brilliant quote. I've not heard that one before, but it totally speaks to me. And I think hopefully will do with the listeners as well, because I think it's so true, isn't it? And I think especially if you come straight out of corporate and you go straight into running a business, there is that period of, adjustment and shift, and you're having to do all of those things if you haven't got a team. And it feels very, very different to having that support network when you're in that corporate role. And those profits are absolutely possible, but probably not overnight at the beginning. So there has to be that inner peace, doesn't there? That real passion. I use one of my taglines that I shared within my book is passion, performance, and profits. And I think it has to start with you. It always has to start with you. That inner sort of reason for setting up your own business, that there is a reason why, and remembering that. But also I think that can shift, and that's okay too. There's a reason that you went into the corporate world, and you probably loved your job at some point, but there's also a reason that you've got that nagging and that niggling feeling that you want something different. And if you have got that, I think it's that, from what I'm hearing you say, is actually just being aware of that and kind of exploring what that is for you, not necessarily being afraid to go into that sort of exploration, but being proactive and kind of leaning into it a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely think that. And I think that's a really excellent point, Sarah, that you mentioned. Like, we don't have to keep ourselves in the same roles. I absolutely loved my job, and I found it very difficult to leave. I was like clinging on right to the end.
Yeah.
And it wasn't about, being dissatisfied in my job. It was about, how could I make a bigger impact in this world? And I think a lot of people who leave their corporate jobs with such a calling and such a mission have a very similar experience or understanding of the nature of what has called them to do something, different. But I think you're right. Upon reflection, like, I think there's an element that we don't necessarily allow ourselves to reflect very often on, our soul's purpose or our calling. And the other thing I think that we don't do very often in such a busy world, Amazon Prime delivery world, is that we don't necessarily just sit in silence. Like, there's always something to do.
So busy, aren't we?
Yes. And then there's this kind of, everyone goes, let's meditate. And it's not just the umming, right? There's an element of, actually, at what point do we sit and listen to what's going on, and to kind of drop deep into that soul alignment, and just check in occasionally with ourselves. And it doesn't have to be every day, every week. It could just be once a year on an annual holiday, or however you want to set it up, or however you want to just drop in and just assess where you are in your life. And I think we kind of get too much hung up on autopilot and live life on automatic, and then all of a sudden the years have passed us by. And, there may be some dissatisfaction, or there may be some, unhappiness within us, but we're not quite sure what, and we don't know how to articulate that, or we hadn't really thought about it. And, life gets a bit more challenging as you get older. You've got more responsibilities. And it's just so fascinating when you kind of do take that little time out, that I think is so important, and really encourage everyone to do that as well. And just kind of think about where you're at that moment, and acknowledge that it's okay if it's different to the last time that you checked. And, it might be that, there's so many barriers. So all of a sudden you're going, I can't do that because, and I can't do this because, and you're kind of coming up with all the barriers and the limiting beliefs and the limiting things that hold us back. But actually, if there's a little whisper about that, what if, what could it look like?
That's the phrase that just came into my mind, is that what if. It's the exciting bit, isn't it?
Yeah. And allow yourself to dream about that. And, if the limitations didn't exist, what would it look like? And And yeah, I'm not saying that we don't have limitations and we, you know, should be irresponsible with, you know, the people that we have in our lives, or the finances or the savings that we've built up. But at the same time, I really believe that we're all here for a purpose and a mission that's bigger than ourselves, and just to tap into what that is, and if you're delivering that to the best of your ability, then I think, you know, there's an element of that to be considered as well.
It's so true. And it's one of the things that it kind of keeps coming up to me when you're talking is this, or my kind of take on sort of work-life balance. And my listeners will know that I kind of talk about this a little bit, but that actually life, it's all life. And actually, you know, work is a pillar of that, but we're so busy working and juggling all the things that we are, that we forget about that kind of the bigger piece, I suppose. Like, what do we actually want from our life goals? Like, what are they? And dreaming big. Like, I think, you know, we do get busy, kind of caught in the everyday, and kind of think, oh, well, who am I to think that I can go and do that? And that can hold us back. And I think you're right in saying, you know, this isn't about being reckless and kind of throwing everything out of the window, but I think it's having that proactive approach to go, or to have those check-ins and just go, is this what I want, or is this still what I want? And if not, what needs to shift to enable me to get closer to that? How do you work with people? Because I know you're a leadership coach and you work with a lot of, especially women, on kind of navigating through things. If someone's kind of comes to you and just like, I've got this feeling that there's more, but I don't even know where to start. Like, how do I explore those things? How do you sort of start getting that awareness and giving yourself permission to explore that, I suppose?
Yeah, that's such a great question. Usually the people that come to me, and they are generally high performing women, that's who I work with. So I work with high performing women to empower them so that they can gain confidence to advance their careers, and specifically in leadership. And generally they're figuring that they're stuck, or they may have reached a ceiling, or that they're self-imposed ceiling perhaps, but that they just need a bit of help. They are lacking in confidence. Maybe they're going back to work after having children. You know, maybe they've got a new boss, maybe it's just a different time period, maybe they've been waiting around for a while and they don't know how to progress their career, they're ready for the next step but they don't know what to do. So those kind of people will reach out to me, and I work on a framework. So I've got a high performance hierarchy. I've got 5 pillars within that, and it's really perfect how you've just set it up, actually, which is, you know, where to start. Well, if you don't know where to start, actually the first pillar is the clarity of vision. So it is really getting clear about what it is that we want, because sometimes we realize, actually, I don't want what I have right now. And that's great, because that enables you to realize, okay, I don't want this, but actually, what do you want? And how are we going to work to enable you to get that? So it is that I find a lot of people who are, yes, I'm very clear that I don't want this, but I don't know what the next is. So we do really work with that kind of clarity of vision as a priority, and as a first instance. We look at the values as well, because I find a lot of people, so values are intrinsic to us. A lot of people don't necessarily know or can articulate what their values are. So I really kind of dive deep into values, because then I think it's so much easier when we've got the next step or the next motivation, to just tie that back intrinsically to your values, so that then you're like really aligned with that motivational piece, and then obviously it moves you forward, because you're so aligned with who you are as a value set, but also who you are as an identity set. So I really try and bring it back to values, and we try and we actually figure out exactly what you're looking for in a clarity of vision, and then we start kind of road mapping how to get there. So then the next pillar is mindset mastery. So I find a lot of things that hold us back as women are things like perfectionism, imposter syndrome. If you are in a leadership role, or you've just been promoted to a leadership role, and you're suddenly concerned that you're not performing in the way that the business might want you to. So there's a lot of kind of elements about, you know, how do we overcome almost the self-beliefs or the self-limiting factors that we've imposed on ourselves, but how can we kind of break through that and overcome that, so that you can thrive in the workplace? The third pillar is always about team, so it's called trust in team. And that's because as a leader, you always want to support and see your team thrive as well. So you've got real high performing teams element to that. The fourth pillar is called action with confidence. And that's really kind of built up throughout the steps, that you can really have those challenging conversations, manage, or handle conflict with complete confidence, and just take those necessary steps that you need to take, but feeling empowered and feeling confident enough to do that. So that's the setup. And then the fifth step is called habits and hacks. So it's really about your everyday habits, your morning routines, setting yourself up for success, and maybe some hacks about kind of productivity, and setting boundaries and making sure that you are just on your A game as much as you possibly can. And as you said quite correctly earlier, that kind of work-life balance pillar comes in here as well.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I love especially the final one, because I think so many people kind of are so going back to that sort of busyness of life, that we're so busy kind of getting out the door, whether it's dropping the kids at school, getting to work. And then it's like, oh, you get to the end of the day and then you're like, I haven't done anything for me. And really knowing what enables you to set yourself up for success is just so important. And I think almost the biggest thing that people miss, and it's going to be different for everyone, isn't it? Sometimes it's doing something at the beginning of the day, something is doing the night before, whatever that looks like. But I think, again, like they can make such a huge difference to how you feel, how you act, how you engage with others, your health. But it's almost the big secret, isn't it? Because people just don't do it. It's just, I remember thinking like this, and my background with kind of being in elite sport and then kind of having kids and living and working around the world and just massively hitting burnout, and then going, what do I need? Like, what do I need that allows me to show up in the best possible way as a wife, as a mom, as a business owner for my clients, whatever that looks like? And it wasn't until I really started testing things and shifting things around and going, okay, I'm a much better morning person. And actually, I need to do kind of my exercise or start the day in the best way for me, that allows me to kind of have that energy to flow through. But I know, speaking to some people, it's like, no, I want to work 3 days a week. And that's cool too. But I think it's, there's so many shoulds around, aren't there? We kind of see what other people are doing as their version of success. And it's like, actually, what do you need? And having that confidence to put those boundaries in place, and habits and hacks is so important.
Actually, just want to jump on what you had said about kind of being whether you kind of label yourself as a morning person or as an evening person. And I have the experience that isn't there this meme that says I'm neither, I'm just a permanently exhausted pigeon, which just came to my mind. But I actually never thought I was a morning person for years, and actually the pandemic really changed that for me. And so we live in London in a small apartment, so me and my husband just here together in a small apartment, 24/7 for 2 years. I really kind of had to think about when my me time was, because actually I was getting up and then I was doing my work, and then I was there was nowhere to go. So then we were, it's TV time or whatever that looks like. Actually, was starting to build my business in that time. That's another story. But when I was realizing where's my me time, I was like, you know what? I'm going to have to get up early to get my me time in. And I really trained myself to get up, and I joined the 5 o'clock club. And I love it and I thrive on it. And I wouldn't have imagined it if you had told me, 10 years ago that I'm going to be a member of the 5 a.m. club. No way, right? No way. But now, so I think, encourage people just to try things, and not to just kind of label themselves, oh, my identity is I'm not a morning person or I'm not an evening person. Actually try things. And it, like a little bit like when you're a child and you're trying broccoli for the first time or something, you know, it might not be great for the first time around, but the more times that you try it, the more that you might realize, you know, what are the benefits of getting up early in the morning. Well, for me, it was me time, it was quiet time. I loved getting up in the dark. I don't ask me why, but I thought I was something special, because wow, this is amazing, you know, I'm here and it's quiet, and you know, this is amazing. I was one of the only people walking on the common. You know, it just felt like a special, like I was part of some exclusive club for me, and I've never looked back. So I just wanted to jump on that, because I had always labeled myself as not a morning person, but actually, isn't it interesting how, you know, we can also be quite fluid in our preferences as well sometimes.
Yeah, and that perfectly dovetails into that, having those check-ins with yourself regularly, and then testing things and looking at ways that can kind of enable you to do things slightly differently if you're not feeling completely aligned or whatever. One of the other things that you mentioned within your pillars there was kind of handling conflict, and you know, doing that in a confident way. And I know that the word conflict can bring up a lot of emotion for people, can't it? And I think I want to delve into this, because I think there's different levels of conflict, and how we navigate through that and our reactions to it, I think, is just so important, because life happens. Like, we're always going to get curveballs, or we're always going to get things that are going to, you know, come up and we're going to have to deal with. But how we deal with those, the mindset, but also the actions we take is just, can make a huge difference on the results within our business or within our careers, or even just as our health as a person. Tell me a little bit more. Tell me a little bit more about this.
I'm so passionate about talking about conflict and handling conflict. And I think it's something that we, you know, with those kind of human skills, we're not really taught. And we try our hand at things, we do a bit of trial and error, and, you know, inevitably we end up in an argument, or, you know, if we believe we're right and the other person is wrong, we have such strong feelings about that. And inevitably, you know, when we come to another person to say, I've got something to say, or we need to have a conversation, you know, even the way that you invite someone into that conversation can be quite scary, or quite like, oh no, you know, you get your defenses up, you kind of think, oh my goodness, what's going to happen, what have I done wrong? Or so I think it's really interesting to dive into conflict, and not just in a combative way. So I think when you think of the word conflict, you think, oh, like there's like, you know, all hell's going to break loose. There's going to be another war. This is going to be a big deal. We may never speak to each other ever again, right? But as adults in the real world, we have to get used to having challenging conversations, and we have to get used to speaking our truth out loud. And, you know, we get so caught up on not hurting the other person that we actually end up hurting ourselves. And we touched a couple of times on boundaries, but I think this is all wrapped up in the same kind of conversation, which is about, how do I handle myself in those situations, and, you know, still be truthful, and still be in integrity and in authenticity to who I am. And I think, you know, if I can bring one thing to the world, it is about that conflict doesn't have to be combative, and that conflict can actually be resolved quite healthily, quite quickly, and with confidence. And I've got a free guide on my website. You'd be welcome to go find it and go listen to it, but it's basically a 4-step process, and it's so when you think about conflict, you think about win-win resolution. So my 4-step process is based on win, so WIN, and I stuck an extra N in there for good measure. And the W of win, it starts with me, so it's who me. And I think when we go into these conversations, we go in going, oh, you've done something wrong, Sarah, you've upset me. Actually, the whole process of looking at conflict with confidence is just to take a step back and look at who I am, and have I overreacted? Is this my ego thinking? Am I not enabling someone to have their own thought process and their own opinion? And, you know, just starting with that very kind of introspective place, rather than coming combatively at somebody because they've done something, they've dinged your car, they've, you're arguing with your husband because he's left his socks, out and not put them in the washing basket, right? These are like everyday conversations that we are not well equipped to deal with, that end up in arguments. And actually there is a different way to handle things that can be more healthy. So the introspective part is just such a oof, right? It's like a pause. Am I overreacting about the socks? Quite possibly. Does it need to be said? Well, maybe, but it doesn't need to be said. It doesn't need to be yelled, right? It could be, it's a passing comment. And then we kind of move on to the I, which is impact versus intention. And Sarah, might have such a good intention to say to you, hey, this isn't really working out for me. But the way I say it might have a different impact, right? And you might take it as, oh my goodness, Beth's upset with me. Whereas actually my intention was just to say, you know what, it's not really working out. Can we figure something else out? Whereas actually the intention and then the impact is quite different. So I think that that's something that we just need to be really aware of as well, is that, let's try and align the impact that we have when we're using our words, which can be kind and, or can be unkind, right? But let's be really clear about the impact and the intention and try to align both of those together, so that we're really having that intentional message is really being delivered. And then those two kind of together, then you have to have this conversation, which is the first N, which is narrate. And this is where you kind of rip the plaster off. But because you're so prepared from having that introspection, the intention and the impact that you want to have, okay, let's now have this conversation. And I think you'll find that as soon as you start having this conversation, the situation's completely diffused from the first two steps. And, you can have a very healthy conversation. And I think it's just such a beautiful skill to have learnt, to be able to do that. And yes, you may have a differing of opinions, but that doesn't have to be a clash. That can just be that we respect where each other is coming from. And you probably find that having gone through this process, actually that relationship is going to be stronger because of it, because you've taken the time to really think about the message that you want to land, because you've thought about where your own ego and your own head is at, and then you've had that conversation. I think it just kind of diffuses by so many levels to kind of have that heart to heart, and there's a reason that it's called that, right? It's not head to head, it's heart to heart. And I think that that's where we need to get to, is from a place of heart and soul, rather than head and and a fast conversation. And then the last N is nurture. And this is the part I absolutely love, because then you get to know the person a little bit better, and you get to nip things in the bud sooner if you need to, if you're in a corporate environment, if you're their manager or their leader. You can kind of then go, actually, do you remember the conversation that we had? Or you can kind of bring it back, and you then know how they're going to respond and react to you. So once you've done it once, I would then really encourage you to kind of nurture that relationship, really respect the other person's perspective and feelings and point of view. And usually you don't have to do it again, because you've had that one conversation, and you can see where each other's coming from. And I think that that's the nurturing of that relationship. And as I said, 9 times out of 10 it will make you a stronger relationship for it. So yeah, that's the process.
Oh, I love that. Really quite straightforward as well. And I think everything you say just always comes back to this kind of awareness. Just pause, that awareness, kind of have that slightly introspective viewpoint, whatever's coming up for you. And I think that's really key to remember. I think the other thing that I took from that was just this recognition that everyone thinks differently, and that's okay. And actually, if we go into something that feels challenging, it might not be challenging you, it's just challenging that thought process or that situation. And I think sometimes there is that sort of personal thing, and almost taking that step back, that awareness of that, and going, actually, is this just the situation, or is this just a different way of thinking? And we can grow so much from those conversations as well. And that nurturing piece I love, because it's it's growth on both sides, isn't it? Like, you can see things from different perspectives. We've all had different experiences. We've all got different knowledge. We've all done things differently in the world. And that's brilliant. It'd be so boring if we were all the same and had exactly the same life path.
Yeah.
But with that comes different lenses, comes different viewpoints on things. And I think being open to that can really help, especially in leadership positions, especially when you're running teams, because our views aren't necessarily the only view. They're probably not the only view, and they're probably not necessarily the right view, or can be tweaked and can be kind of built upon. And I think that's one big thing that, I used to see when I was in the corporate world. It was almost this kind of concrete ceiling to a certain extent. It's like, is this view and that's happening. And I think that's something when I've kind of been building my team within my business, of kind of going, actually, this is a business. Yes, it's my business, but actually you're all part of this team to help make it successful. And I'm really open to viewpoints from my team. And I love that. And they love that too, because they're like, well, how about we do it this way? And I'm like, oh my goodness, I've not thought of that. And I think that's, for me, that's a really useful point as a leader, of having that diversity of thinking is kind of a phrase, isn't it? Of just, when we think diversity, we think of it in lots of different ways, but actually that thinking, those different thoughts, that's really important.
Yeah, I love this phrase, diversity of thinking. And I think it's so prevalent and so relevant in today's society, is that, we can get caught up in our same set of friends, or, the same company. So I was at the same company actually for 14 years. And, you can kind of, now that I kind of stepped away, you can see that there is like very similar thinking that happens in organizations. And, yes, there may be big changes or big shakeups every now and again. But I think it's really important to remember that everyone has a valid voice, everyone has a valid thought process. And isn't it wonderful, as you just said, that we all have different experiences and different childhood experiences, different cultural references, different things that we can just draw from that shape us into who we are today. And that's why every single voice is so valuable, from, the CEO to, the intern. Everybody's got a different lens of where they're coming from in their worldview, in their world perspective. And, I don't think it's about, you're wrong and I'm right, but it's about bringing that intentionality or that open-mindedness to a conversation, and, just feeling like your voice is heard and is valued. And even if we don't end up going down the suggested route, you shouldn't be made wrong to feel that you have got an opinion that is slightly differing to an organization, to a client, to a business, to a group of friends, to a family even. And, I think we're so concerned with what people will think about us if we bring an opinion that isn't liked by the entire group. And then we can kind of silence ourselves before we've even begun. And then you may have missed out on a wonderful idea or solution or opportunity, because we were too afraid to kind of bring a slightly different perspective. And I just think that's so sad. I think everybody has got a valued opinion, and that's where I think about kind of conflict being healthy, is actually, conflict is, if you think of conflict as neither good or bad, you just have a differing opinion, right? And it doesn't matter who's then making the final decision and which direction you finally go in, because then it's, there's so many other things that are involved in alignment to corporate values or different agendas. But at the same time, if you just kind of take away the good or bad, and think that there's nothing is good or bad, right? It's thinking makes it so. And I think that that's so fascinating when we talk about kind of that diversity of thinking. But every voice is valuable. Everyone, has this innate possibility within them. And I think the best leaders that I've come across are the ones who are open and willing to hear about that and to listen, and even to take it one step further, to kind of hire people who are maybe even better than themselves in certain skills or certain areas, and they don't feel threatened by that. So as I said, if nothing is either good or bad, but thinking makes it so, then the threat purpose, or that posed by, you know, somebody who's better than you, is all in your mindset as well. So I think that, you know, the best leaders that I have come across are the ones who are willing and open to learn along the way. And even if that is from their team that actually reports to them, you know, even better, because then as a high performing team, you'll be thriving, and you'll certainly go further than you would be as an individual.
And I think this is also why it's so important as people that we surround ourselves with different thinkers as well, because we can live in an echo chamber. It's one of the reasons that I love being in masterminds and I love working with different coaches, is that there's different lenses on things, and what works for one person isn't necessarily going to work with you. But I think it always goes back to this awareness piece of, what do you need? Like, if you know that you are in that echo chamber, that's okay, but what could you do to take a step out of that, or who could you spend some time with that kind of maybe throws a different light on things? Same within your business. I think, you know, if you are exploring opportunities and opening that Pandora's box, like, don't filter those before you've even written them down. I think
Exactly.
that's really
Absolutely.
important as well, isn't it?
Oh my gosh, definitely. And, you know, I think that so many times that we think about, so I'm a qualified coach, and one of the things that they taught me when I was doing my coaching training was, you know, there's no limitations. Everything's a possibility. And even some of the questions that they can ask you to consider are, you know, okay, what would you do? What would you never do? What's the opposite of what you would do? So they really try to kind of think about that 360-degree perspective, to think about, even if it's something you would never do, write it down, write it as a potential option, right? Because it broadens that horizon, broadens that thinking, and kind of gets you into that, oh, maybe I could do that actually.
Yeah.
Right. So there's elements of, you know, let's not censor ourselves before we've even begun. Right. And that could have been, you know, you or I could have gone, no, we're really happy in corporate, thanks so much. Building a business and being an entrepreneur is just a dream. And it's something that's going to be a dream, you know, forever and ever and ever. But actually, you know, what makes you take that step into making that dream a reality? And I think that those are the things that you are, when you come across it and you really think, oh, I can't possibly leave my company that I love, I can't leave my team, I can't leave my secure salary. But actually, you know, what would it take? Right. And let's not censor ourselves into that. Right. And, you know, there's so much to think about and consider, but at the same time, we've got one life.
Yeah.
And that's where I would just love to bring it back full circle into that kind of soul's alignment, and that passion and that calling. We've got one life, and, you know, yes, I was meant to be in corporate, but yes, I was also meant to stand on my own 2 feet and be a solopreneur, and, you know, think about supporting women in leadership and empowering them to advance their career, because that is my soul's calling too. So I think, you know, it's not necessarily that there's just one thing out there for us. But there's, you know, it's a fluidity and a movement, and let's just, as I said in the beginning, just keep checking in and making sure that feels aligned to us, and that our purpose is being played out fully.
Absolutely. And I think building on that is you are absolutely where you should be at this moment.
Love that.
And I think it's, you know, I look back on my corporate career and people have said, you know, do you wish that you'd never been in corporate and you'd gone straight into running your own business? And I for one, don't believe in regretting anything, because I think you can learn so much from everything that you've done, and we're all on this journey. And I think, had I not had that experience of, you know, being in marketing, being in sales, living and working around the world and having different cultural lenses, running some massively brilliant events and working with the most varied people that I could imagine, I wouldn't be able to have this lens and being able to support people in the way that I do. So I think when people are kind of having those little niggles or those thought processes of going, oh, well, I can't do that, or I can't do this, those questions that you sort of posed there of, well, what would it take for you to do that? Like, who do I need to be to enable me to get into that space? Or what actions do I need to take? Who do I need to speak to enable that? That enables everything to become a possibility. And that becomes really exciting. And that is that leadership piece. It's being that proactive leader of going, this is my one life. How am I going to lead it? And I think that just really, yeah, kind of almost sums up our whole conversation, doesn't it? Of kind of
Brilliant.
bringing it full circle. around to that kind of real soul alignment. Like, who are you? What do you want?
Yeah.
And what do you need to do about it?
Yeah.
I think it's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, Beth, we've covered so much in such a short time.
Put the world to rights.
Yeah, exactly. We've got so many similarities and so many, I think even our background is quite similar as well. We were talking before we came
Very
live.
much so.
Where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
Amazing. Well, I'm super active on Instagram at Meet Beth Hocking. Everything's my name, actually. Then I've got a website, www.beth-hocking, HOCKING.com. And I'm on LinkedIn as well. So yeah, I'm just putting out various bits of content. I maybe now's a good time to announce that I am about to launch something in October, which has been super secret until now. I'm going to launch the Leadership Lab at the end of October, and it's a kind of group program for 6 months, and I'm going to take you through all of those pillars that I've just mentioned in our conversation earlier. 1 pillar per month, and the 6th month will be kind of implementation and accountability. And it's going to be amazing program with such a like-minded community of female leaders who are doing amazing things in their industries, and I'm really, really, really excited. So if you'd like some more information on that as well, keep your eyes peeled on my Instagram or on my website. And yeah, things are heating up, let's say, in the Leadership Lab. So it's all exciting for me. All go.
Fabulous. And now is your time, if you're listening to this and kind of having those kind of little trigger points, a little light bulb moments, now is your time. Like, it absolutely is. There's so many opportunities for you. And I'd actually love your feedback on this episode as well, because I think that's always really useful. So if you have got any thoughts or something's kind of coming up, then feel free to message either me at Sarah Cook Coaching on Instagram, or obviously Beth. She shared her details earlier. But leave us a review. Like, this is the way that we can get these conversations out to the wider world. So do leave me a review or a rating, and feel free to tag either of us as well, because I think it's such an important conversation, especially for women who want to step up and live life in that sort of soul aligned way from a leadership perspective. It's so, so important. Beth, thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure on having you on the Healthy Business Podcast. Thank you for listening, and I will see you on the next episode.